And so this roundtable has the following objectives. We want to share news, strategic plans, resources, and tools related to embodied carbon. We want to report on planning and future dates for conferences, webinars, and meetings. We want to really inspire and facilitate ongoing communication and conversation among key leaders that are related to reducing embodied carbon in the building industry. And finally, we want to encourage convergence on shared embodied carbon terminology, data standards, benchmarks, and targets for reducing embodied carbon. And so to start off, I've asked Brad Benke from the CLF staff to report on the launching of a new research initiative by the Carbon Leadership Forum. So Brad, take it away.
Sounds good. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, perfect. Just fine.
Right. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah, so thanks for asking me to speak, Andrew. Earlier this spring, we kind of kicked off an internal portion of a much larger study called the CLF Whole Building LCA Benchmark Study. And this is, we're referring to it as V2 because we did something similar in 2017, and this will be a much more comprehensive and updated benchmarking study for whole building LCA. And I'll give you a quick project overview of the different phases and sort of the approach, methods, and goals that we're trying to achieve. And then it would be great just to hear some people's thoughts about the project at the end, because we're still kind of formulating this whole multi-year project scope. To start with, just to make sure we're understanding what this project is doing, I want to talk a little bit about the two different sort of major types of LCA that people are engaging with in this industry. There's a material approach, which essentially focuses on exactly what it sounds like, materials and products. So single materials and single products, typically using EPDs or custom LCA models to measure and compare those materials and products. This is something that really incentivizes manufacturers and contractors to actually procure and develop low carbon products and materials. So this could be, you could think of this as optimizing a concrete mix design with a lower carbon concrete, or making changes at a manufacturing plant to reduce the carbon of a specific product. The building approach then is looking at the entire building over its entire life cycle. So this is really using whole building LCA tools and is incentivizing designers and engineers and also contractors to really design out embodied carbon from their projects. So this could capture things like building material reuse, use of bio-based materials, use of one type of structural system over another. So it's really affecting the design decisions that the design community is making before they even get to some of these material level product choices. And the material sort of world has kind of been the focus in North America for the last several years. The whole building approach has been a little bit more advanced in European countries and a little bit less so in North America. However, it is growing pretty rapidly. The way that architects and structural engineers and some contractors are engaging in this space is by using whole building LCA tools to measure the impacts of their project over time. And so the design community is already tracking sort of incremental improvements on their own projects, but they're really not sharing this type of information with a broader audience. And when design firms are using these tools, they're probably keeping this type of information in their own office, maybe sharing one or two case studies. On top of that, the way that most designers are using whole building LCA tools tends to be a little inconsistent. The tools themselves tend to be a little inconsistent. And there's no really standardized reporting metric to make all of this data comparable. So that was the impetus for this project. Some of the challenges that we identified early on, or have thought about for a long time at the CLF, is that whole building LCA model results are really difficult to interpret without consistency of modeling practices and reporting standards. On top of that, the people that really want to use whole building LCA data or benchmarks like codes, green building rating systems, and the design community, they don't have a place to share those data results of whole building LCA or make comparisons to other people's modeling. So there's no current robust benchmark in North America. There's also no current centralized database in North America. However, there are a lot of really great groups that are trying to push for this right now. So it's a perfect time for this project. And ultimately, while whole building LCA is increasing in practice, there's actually not broad consensus on what really drives low carbon construction in projects, and especially throughout the design process. So again, not that material approach where we have a very good sense of ranges for specific materials, but for whole buildings, what really makes those low carbon projects low carbon, and how can other designers start emulating that? So we set out with a few research questions. Like I was saying, what qualifies as a low carbon building, and what are reasonable benchmarks? What actions can architects, engineers take to actually make really meaningful reductions on their project? The expected variability of embodied carbon, like what construction types, what building heights, what structural systems, what are all those design decisions that really matter for reducing carbon of buildings? And what is the variability of all those results? How much does the whole building LCA tool matter? How much does the background data matter? How much does the model resolution matter? For instance, if a building is designed really early in the design process, how detailed does that project need to be in order to get an accurate estimate of its embodied carbon? And then, of course, how can the CLF help fill all these gaps to really increase transparency and usable data for the whole industry? Ultimately, we know a lot more than we used to about the embodied carbon of whole buildings, but the information that we do now have is not granular enough to really drive decision-making in the design process. And it's also not rigorous enough to be used with confidence to set larger reduction requirements or targets. So that's why you don't see much or any robust policy or standards or codes in North America saying we cannot go over this threshold for new building construction. Europe is getting closer, and there's lots of people trying to push on these levers, but not quite there yet. So what we're setting out to do is actually a multi-year project. We are going to produce guidance and reporting templates for whole building LCA. We will develop a data set of 200 or more, hopefully a lot more, really high resolution whole building LCA models. The difference between this study and what we've done in the past is that we are exclusively focusing on real world projects, making sure that the physical scope included in the building is consistent and comparable. The methods used to create the whole building LCA are all consistent and comparable, so that we are really in an apples to apples sort of database rather than a more disaggregated. We're also going to do a lot of data analysis to really understand the variability of the results that we find and identify, again, what is driving those low carbon buildings and what's driving those high carbon buildings. We're going to publish benchmarks from the study, develop data dashboards, and share other findings so that the entire AEC and policy and code communities can use this information. And we'll create a framework for making accurate comparisons between different types of benchmarks. There will also be, well, I'll touch on that later. A quick look at the big broad picture of what we're trying to do. We started the pilot phase in the spring of this year, which is really just sort of a very small proof of concept and testing the infrastructure for future phases. In this fall, we'll kick off a much broader push for stakeholder engagement with lots of different types of organizations. We will develop the actual database that we're trying to create. The data analysis and benchmark development will take quite a time. That'll push into probably the end of 2023. Then we'll be publishing findings and sharing knowledge, doing all sorts of cool outreach at the end of the project as well. Part of the goal of this work, not something that we're quite taking on yet, but is identifying opportunities through this work to launch a North American whole building LCA reporting database. So we will also be trying to find collaborators or support or just build momentum for either us or a collaboration of a lot of people to help take that on. So the next few slides are going to be all about what we're doing in this pilot phase. Again, it's really just a smaller test and development of the necessary infrastructure to do a whole building benchmark in a really robust way. So we're looking at what types of data is available from firms that are actually doing whole building LCA. How can we collect data while respecting, privacy and sensitivity needs of all those different organizations? We'll do some really coarse comparison of the data that we get in terms of comparing the values, benchmark values to other past studies, which is also tied into a lit review that we're working on. And ultimately try to get at least a sense of, what is typical embodied carbon figures per whole building as well as building element. So very preliminary findings to start off with, but hopefully a lot more in depth in the future. The outcomes will have draft modeling guidance and reporting templates. We'll have a lot of feedback on whole building LCA practice from some of the pilot firms that are helping us out to understand, what are really the challenges and barriers to architects and engineers, contractors really doing whole building LCA in a robust and comparable way, as well as sharing that information. We will assemble a very small pilot data set of aligned whole building LCA models with material quantity estimates and detailed building attributes. And then at the end, coming up this fall, we're going to do a gap analysis to help define future phase 2. As I mentioned, we've started a really big background literature review to help inform all of the data collection and analysis. Stakeholder engagement in the pilot phase has been pretty limited to architecture firms that are using the Tally whole building LCA tool. We have a very limited scope in this pilot phase. We are pushing to get a much broader stakeholder engagement with not just the AEC community, but lots of other larger organizations that are engaged in similar work, as well as governmental organizations. We've developed some data management infrastructure that will be used again in phase 2. And we are creating a small data set, maybe around 100 whole building LCA models collected from firms. And this is really just the test or proof of concept. This is the part of the project that we're planning to expand and grow as much as we can in the next phase. And coming later this fall, we'll have some very preliminary early findings and definitions for phase 2. Let's see, that I just talked about most of that. I'm gonna skip that. So where we're at, we've announced the project. There's a website up that I'll share in a second. We've done a lot of the great legwork for getting sort of a model collection structure in place. We've done a couple test model collections with a very small number of pilot partners, and we're kind of prepping for this final round of data collection in the pilot phase. The next huge step that we're working on is identifying all the different types of future partners, collaborators, stakeholders, et cetera. The pilot phase, again, has really focused on a small number of architecture firms that are heavily using whole building LCA and specifically Tally. In future phases, we're going to open that up to a much larger group, architects, engineers using basically any kind of whole building LCA tool. We're also going to look at folks working in AEC or code or policy spaces to help lead a technical advisory group for the study, especially when it comes to some of the data analysis that we're going to do. And then we'll also be looking at a lot of outreach and harmonization efforts, again, with, I know there's a lot of folks on this call even that are engaged in very similar work, and we want to be harmonizing reporting and standardization as much as we can with all these different organizations that are doing this great work. So with that, there is a great project webpage on our website that you can check out. You can fill out an open call for interest or participants. That will just ask a few basic questions about your organization and what your level of engagement is in this space, that we can kind of start to get a contact list built up of who might fit well into certain stakeholder engagement groups. and hopefully wrap this project, or this pilot phase, up in the fall and really kick off with a little bit larger of a team in September to push for phase 2. So I know I went fast. I know that was a lot to digest, but I would definitely love to hear any questions people have, suggestions on the study, how they might envision using information from this study, what kind of values it has for them, or any other questions about the data, the analysis, or suggestions, organizations to collaborate with, all sorts of stuff. So thanks.
Great, thank you very much, Brad. And I'll make sure that everybody has your email address and the URL for the project itself on the website in the notes to this meeting. So we'll hold off on comments or questions right this minute. We've got a bunch of reports to get through this morning. And so thank you very much for that, Brad. And also then we've got a short announcement or report from Megan Kalsman, also from the CLO staff, about a really valuable embodied carbon policy training series that we've just released and announced. So take it away, Megan.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. So I'm Megan Kalsman. I am a policy researcher with the CLF, and we just released a new educational series. We're calling it the Embodied Carbon Policy Educational Series. It's a series of videos, just like you can see here, and we dive into different types of policies. There's 6 core sessions. We're doing an introduction to embodied carbon policy landscape. We look at climate action plans, procurement policies, building codes, zoning and city incentive programs, reuse and deconstruction. So these are 6 videos that we published on YouTube, and we have other things to go along with that as well. So in case you want to present these videos yourself or do these presentations yourself, we prepare the slide decks with these different Google slides so you can do it. And we also have a session outline in case you want to go over different sessions with your group. And we have discussion activities as well. So these can take about 40 to 1 hour. And it's a really great way to talk about these different types of policies with your group. So I have the link right here. I'll paste it in the chat as well. We're really excited about these core sessions. This is just the beginning. We're looking for feedback and to see if we should make more videos in the future. That's all I have. Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot, Megan. Appreciate that. And next, we've got a couple of kind of linked comments or reports from Migdalia Karyan from the U.S. Department of Transportation Federal Highway Administration and Terry Swack from Sustainable Minds. So Migdalia, you wanna start there?
Good morning, everyone. I hope, can you hear me? Can you confirm?
Yes, just fine.
Yes, unfortunately, my headset that will allow me to speak very clear to you. Apparently, after 2 years of, beating headsets for more than 10 hours a day, they decided to give up on me. So I hope that you can hear me. Terry, if please correct me, you would like to start our section, right?
No, I want you to go.
I can go after you.
No, you can go first.
Present ACLCA so I can.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right
okay.
ahead.
You want me to go first? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, that's fine. Okay, then I'll do that. All right, let me share my screen. Oh, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Uh-oh, I'll make you the co-host right this second,
Okay.
Terry, and there you go.
Okay. All right. Let me make sure this is. There it is. Well, hi,
Great.
everyone, and pleasure to be here. Today I'm here not with my Sustainable Minds hat on necessarily, but as my co-chair of the ACLCA PCR Guidance Working Group. And what I'm going to share with you today is the work that we've done over the last couple of years to put together a new version of the American Center for Life Cycle Assessment's guidance for creating product category rules. And the reason Migdalia and I are are doing this together is because you'll see how the Federal Highway FHWA played a very significant role in seeding the early research that informed this entire project. And Migdalia will then talk to you about how important and why EPDs and reducing carbon impacts is so important for federal highways. So this is a shortened version of the presentation we gave to the whole ACLCA community, which Migdalia and we all did together. So really, here's the premise, which is that if we're going to get, at the end of the day, EPDs that are reliable to make informed decisions, both about reducing carbon impacts and then even using materials across the supply chain in EPDs for finished products, then PCRs need to be created in a way that produce consistent and reliable EPDs. And people have been saying that for a long time, but it hasn't been until now when there really is awareness in the marketplace. And now as regulatory activities are being enacted, that the ACLCA recognized we got to get out in front of this and get our arms around providing guidance to the industry about how to standardize the creation of PCRs to deliver credible EPDs. Further, it's the time in the world to start getting people to publish EPDs digitally and no longer just publishing print documents that then have to be scanned or machine read, which is very inaccurate. And so this gives us the opportunity to really create a whole new set of processes and workflows that can get people collaborating and working more efficiently to produce the outcomes that we all need. So as I mentioned, this work's been in development for quite some time. The ACLCA did first publish a set of PCR guidelines back in 2013. And it did turn out that all of the North American program operators did align their EPD programs, their governance documents and their EPD programs with the guidance. So there's no reason to believe that North American program operators won't move to aligning their programs with this new guidance, but it's a big ask, what we're asking people to do differently. And so you can see it started out a couple of years ago when FHWA contracted with Amlan Mukherjee and Chait Bhatt and a few others to do a research project to evaluate existing PCRs using an early version of the technical evaluation tool to see if the PCRs that FHWA was interested in, the EPDs that were created from those PCRs, whether those PCRs were set up to produce credible EPDs. And so they created essentially an analysis tool to evaluate existing PCRs to determine the reliability of those results. So with that research, they came to the ACLCA and said, hey, we'll give you this research. Let's work together and update the ACLCA research. So that's what we did. We joined forces. We did a gap analysis of the existing guidance relative to this research that was done. And really we're able to pull off a 1 + 1 = 5 type of project where we created not just a document per se, but actually a toolkit where the intention is that it continues to be updated like a piece of software. This is version 1.0. And what we did was we separated process and methods, so how PCRs get done, we separated process and procedures from methods. And so the checklist document, which I'm going to show you, describes all of the processes and tasks organized by roles, the participants who create PCRs, program operators, PCR committee members, and PCR reviewers. And then we've created a whole set of addenda that will continue to grow that qualify and quantify certain calculation methods and different ways of attributing data so that everybody can be doing everything the same way, so that that doesn't happen differently as well. And kind of the big innovation was realizing that EPDs do get used for different purposes, and that depending upon the purpose, there can be, more or less, or at least a baseline of rigor that goes into creating the PCR. So for each of the roles, there are tasks, and each of those tasks gets associated with the EPD use case level. So the baseline EPD is used for transparency, just the way it is today, to be able to explain what's happening in the product's life cycle. But if the EPD is going to be used for either public or private procurement, then there's 20 more criteria that need to be achieved in the creation of the PCR to make the PCR compliant with creating EPDs that can be used for procurement. And then at the highest use case is when the EPD is used as a data source. There are 3 other criteria that need to be achieved in the creation of the PCR to produce EPDs that can be used for that. So today the checklist lives in a Google Sheet document. You're able to go download it. I'll give you the URL for that in a minute. But there's a tab for each role. So the program operator checklist, the PCR committee checklist, PCR review panel checklist, and you can see each of the criteria. Each of the criteria in the checklist. There you can see the use case level assigned to it. And if I were to zoom in on that, like here we go. So there's different categories of tasks for each group. And in fact, written into the criteria are the tasks for actually integrating the use of the guidance into the process. So that's actually part of making the PCR be conformant, is ensuring that each of the user types followed the process tasks. And at the end of the day, it is the job of the reviewers to ensure that all of the tasks have been followed. So the other thing that will interest this group is that, I talked about digitizing EPDs earlier, and given that Building Transparency has really done great work to build OpenEPD with a PCR builder component to it as well. In the guidance is the reference to OpenEPD and links to it. So we're going to be working to encourage people to use OpenEPD to publish first digitally and then do printed PDFs. And lastly, this is an open initiative. It is a living toolkit, and we want to engage all folks in the industry who are either program operators or who would participate in a PCR development working group, or who might play the roles of PCR verifiers. We invite you to join the working group, but we also invite you to join the user group, which will be the ongoing group of users who's using it and giving feedback to the working group who will maintain the guidance. So if you're interested in joining one or the other, email me or Debbie Steckel at ACLCA, and you can go here to download the toolkit, and I will put this link into the chat as well as a link to this document. And Miguel, you're up.
Thank you. Let me just thank you very much for that, Terry. And before Migdalia, you begin, let me just mention, we've got a bunch of folks on the agenda to give brief reports, so we'll have to move all of us, be just conscious of the time. And this meeting is scheduled to go for a total of 90 minutes. So we're already 37 minutes into it. And this also feels, Terry, this really feels as foundational to the work that all of us are doing as the whole building LCA benchmarking project that Brad was reporting on a little bit earlier. It's really, really essential. So Migdala, you want to take it over?
Yes, thank you, Andrew. And as Andrew mentioned, I only had 3 minutes, so Terry asked me to follow her after her presentation, and I just would like to ask to add to what Terry said, that the technical work that was needed in order to create these requirements has been done through the ACLCA PCR guidance that Terry explained very well. I would like to provide the perspective of the end users now, as we have been seeing at the state and also at the federal level, more public agencies are moving towards creating and developing their buy clean policies. Now is the turn on the policy level to adopt some of these, as Terry mentioned, as the ACLCA PCR guidelines, to signal to the operators that not only we are looking for having EPDs that are isoconformance, because as Terry explained, that might not be enough for us to successfully use EPDs in procurement to inform the decision making, but also to make sure that they are conformant with some of these requirements at the procurement level, as Terry explained. My one other minute, I wanted to use it to talk about the climate challenge that Federal Highway launched on Earth Day. I'm not sure if everyone have heard of it. I will share the link in the chat of the website. But the Federal Highway Sustainable Pavement Program has been created since 2010 to advance the knowledge of having more sustainable pavements in our highway projects. Now, it's the first time that in the program, we have the opportunity to provide funding opportunity for our stakeholders to advance strategies on the sustainable arena. And as such, the climate challenge presents a first ever opportunity for not only our state DOTs, but also we have extended to all public sector entities to apply for technical assistance. The funding portion is only for the state DOT because of the mechanism that we had to employ. But being this the first time that there are some funding available, is signaling to the industry and to our stakeholders the importance of addressing embodied carbon and to understand more and more. So for this group, I think that we could work collaboratively to move some of these strategies, and I'm looking forward to continue working with all of you. Thank you, Andrew.
Great, thank you so much, Migdalia. Next we have, so Lori Ferris, you're in the room, I believe, and would you please give us a short report? I think we're moving close toward the final release of the CARE tool, and you can also say a word about the ZeroNet carbon collaboration as well.
Great, thanks. Hi everyone, I will be brief. So I'm one of the co-chairs of the ZeroNet Carbon Collaboration for Existing and Historic Buildings, which is a group that was founded to really foster collaboration and conversation across fields related to built heritage, sustainability, and design. And one of the projects that we've been working on with the Carbon Leadership Forum, and which is now officially a project of Architecture 2030, is the CARE tool, which is an online tool, will be an online tool to quickly quantify and compare the total carbon benefits of building reuse and upgrade compared to new construction. That is, we just presented with Terry yesterday, but we should have that publicly launched this fall. We're just going through the final web development phases and final steps in data validation before we launch, with plans to quickly move into phase 2 to accommodate some broader functionality, including a portfolio scale phase to support policy and planning efforts. we're very excited about that. We also just received a second Wonder Grant, who were some of our
great.
first funders. So that was good news.
Oh, that's fantastic news.
Yes, and then just a quick note on the ZNCC for those of you who are interested in learning more and joining us. Our next meeting will be on August 18th at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And I will be presenting with Elizabeth Rowe from Agnes Scott College about a total carbon study we've done to quantify the climate benefits of their building stewardship approach, linking their climate resilience and preservation priorities together. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Lori. And Marnese, you just sat down again, so I'm going to call on you. Thank you, Marnese Jackson. I'm really happy that you're back, and she is our representative from the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition, and you can share your screen and take it away.
Thank you. So never mind that it says July coalition meeting. I'm Marnese Jackson, and I'm based in Pontiac, Michigan. And so the coalition is a state region focusing on eliminating fossil fuels in buildings and homes before 2050. And this is the team. We're a small but mighty team for those who haven't met us. And I'm gonna go fast because I know you said 3 minutes. So this is our 8-state region. We do have national and regional partners who are part of the coalition to help advance this mission of ours. And so some updates, and I will give access to these slides. Our Health and Federal Policy Working Group has been busy. And so with the federal working group, we have been reaching out and doing outreach around the state weatherization program that's come down from the bill funding. And so we have held several meetings with Wisconsin, Minnesota, Indiana, and Ohio. Just waiting for other states to respond, just how they're going to implement these funds in our respective communities. And so, of course, building decarbonization, we operate as the convener, but then also we want to hold the different federal working groups and the funds accountable to make sure that these funds go to communities who really do need it, and that the process is to harm the communities when they get there. And just a background about me, I have been in weatherization, and sometimes these communities don't receive them. So the health working group, we are focusing on sending comments we're preparing comments in regards to the different federal things that are coming down. And so our coalition is looking to sign on to different things that are happening right now in our federal government. And so now we are implementing training and technical assistance program to bring more awareness of health as an interconnected, intersectional issue in regards to buildings. And so if you're interested in any of these working groups, and we have like a long list of other working groups, please reach out to me. Our affordable housing working group, we help prepare comments for the Minnesota Qualified Allocated process, which our coalition members drafted this process. It was a collective process which the other states helped prepare this so we can make sure that it was equitable. And we had all these different organizations sign on as contributors for this Minnesota QAP. Next is the Ohio. They're preparing now for their QAP, but we will start preparing comments for those. Coming up, we have some trainings that we would like to invite you to. August is focused on Black Liberation Month. For those who don't know, that month is signified for that. So if you're interested in 2 trainings, understanding implicit bias and building decarbonization and undoing white supremacy culture and building decarbonization, come learn about that. Our friends at Mothers Out Front is going to be our facilitator. And I'll put the information in the chat about the registration. And it's 2 trainings actually, but we may two different flyers, the same flyer. So if you know anybody who is interested in being part of the coalition and they do not have the funding or the resources, they can apply for a participation stipend and an empowerment grant to receive funding to do a project, a demonstration project, i.e. electrification or an induction heating type of demonstration, anything to get people engaged in building decarbonization. So if you are interested in applying, the grants range from $3,000 to $8,000 just to participate. Just come and show up. We want to learn about what you're doing so we can support and vice versa. And the empowerment grants are $35,000 to $50,000 depending on the project that you want to do. The staff do not evaluate it. This is a coalition-driven initiative. And so if you're interested, I will put the link to the application in the chat, and the applications are due August the 5th. So if you know anyone, send this information along. And then our equity summit is coming up November. It's November 22nd through the 4th, leading up to COP27. And so if you're interested in attending this equity summit, it's open to everyone. It was really awesome last year. And if you just like to join the planning committee, we welcome all people. So thank you. And if you have any questions, inbox me and I yield the floor.
Great, thank you so much. And I loved your last slide, by the way. That was great. And next on the agenda, we've got Bruce King. Would you please perhaps give us make sure that we all know once again about the book and any other quick things that you need to, you'd like to share about EcoBuild Network.
Thanks, Andrew. Well, I'll keep this really quick. Really just to let you all know, Chris Magwood and I just published a book, Build Beyond Zero. I'm going to do an old-fashioned screen share here, like this. And this is the book, and you can get it. And I put a link in the chat if you want to find it. But Chris immediately ran off and signed up with RMI, some outfit in Colorado somewhere that I'm not sure what they do, but I haven't heard from him since then. We're trying to get the word out there in all sorts of ways that getting to zero is actually not the goal that we want to shoot for. It's what everybody talks about, and it's memorable so people remember it. But in fact, it's not going to get us where we need to go, which is a stable climate for our grandchildren. We need to draw carbon down out of the air, and then we need to find a place to put it. And buildings, it turns out, are a great place to put it. That's the message. We do need to reduce emissions, of course. We're not saying that's wrong. It's just not quite enough. So we published this book. It's only been out a couple of months now. At least 2 or 3 people have bought it, to my knowledge. So it's doing well. But that's really all I have to report. I'll leave it at that. I'm certainly happy to take any questions or anything offline or something. But again, there's a link in the chat. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Bruce. And I just want to note, an addition that Ryan Zitzo made to the chat window just now. He says the book is great, Bruce, highly recommended.
Thank you.
I'll share in that point of view. Francis Yang, you're in the call, I know, and would you please give us a short report on status and progress on the SE 2050 commitment, and make sure that everybody knows knows what it is, for example.
Okay. Yeah, here I did prepare slides, but I'm gonna let's kind of zoom through this. The SE 2050 program was actually created in response to the SE 2050 challenge that the CLF issued. Oh, sorry, I guess because I'm not in. It's a program for structural engineers and that SEI, the Structural Engineering Institute of ASCE, is supporting. And this is our team, but really everything I'm going to fly through today can be found on our website, se2050.org. So we are volunteers, part of a subcommittee of SEI under the sustainability committee that's been around for a long time, actually. But we started, our subcommittee has started about 3 years ago. And how it works, the basics of the program is that there's a commitment made by firms. The program's modeled after AIA 2030 really closely, and the idea of really bringing firms into a a method and a way to actually reach our global need to stay under 1.5, and that structures has an enormous part of that the structural materials of steel and concrete are huge contributors to the greenhouse gas emissions, and engineers can really be part of getting to our reductions. So it's a program for firms, and these are the three main components. The way we see it working is that you make a commitment, then you create a plan, and then collectively, in addition to what you're doing to reduce on projects and within your firm, we are collectively going to collect data that'll help also give us better targets to then better compare. And so the minimum is, well, actually, I'm going to kind of skip through this kind of stuff. Again, this is on the website. But as an update, we have actually just a little bit more than this now. These are stats from a couple of months ago. But we have over 150 projects submitted, and over 60 ECAPs that have been received. So I think I just wanted to highlight that under advocacy, there's the 4 pillars of education, advocacy, reporting, and reductions. And under advocacy, we're definitely point people to the Carbon Leadership Forum because of all the great work you're doing. Then the SC 2050 database, I thought people were probably really curious about this, so just brought out some highlights. Of course, we all know the reason for needing a database. Our database is, of course, just really focused on structure. And again, like really getting firms to be familiar. So, that is our priority, which might be different from other database efforts that are going on. Reviewed a lot of existing databases, question of what is collected. So this is, took a lot of work in looking at existing databases and existing tools. So if you're ever interested in getting to know what this is like a screenshot of the database, only signatory firms have access to this database. But if you're interested in kind of the guts of it, this user guide is documents and is publicly available on our website. And I think the parts of it that were probably interesting for this group are in the input parameters and the glossary. So having a common vocabulary, right? And then having like really commonality in being able to share data across all of our database efforts and analysis, I think is going to be really important, or, we recognize being really important. And the way that, all this going to work in an ecosystem, I think is also wanted to make this group aware that we plan to have an industry roundtable that's going to really help us make use of the data in the database. We don't plan to set the benchmarks and targets ourselves. I think that's something we have to do collectively. And in the future too, we want to be able to link up with LCA tools better. And a huge key part of this too is like having a taxonomy, right? Like that we need to have a common understanding of how we break down our buildings and categorize the components and materials. So this is something we're also really trying to work on and get out published and get some critical review about and collaborate with others on. The last thing as a database feature is including infrastructure. Everything I think I mentioned. And engaging ASCE. Of course, ASCE covers a lot more than buildings. So that's why there's a great opportunity for that. Other resources on our website, just wanted to let you know that they're there. Stuff about rating systems and just useful things I think that people on this call might find helpful. And just to also reiterate that we are under the larger sustainability committee that has been prolific in the last decade or more that it's been around in trying to advance embodied carbon understanding for structures. And if you wanted to stay in the know and help us spread the word, CLF has also helped to create a forum for us. And then a lot of us are on LinkedIn. We're also trying to create a LinkedIn page specifically for the SC 2050 program. So thank you. I hope that was fast enough.
That was perfect. Thank you so much, Francis. And now is and we do have a number of number of other reports. So I'll just be asking everybody to be succinct and precise and concise. But this is another great moment in the agenda to bring in Luc Leung, because Luc is one of the founders and a member of the steering committee of the MEP 2040 initiative, launched a year or so ago by the CLF challenge to MEP engineers to reduce embodied carbon in building systems by 2040. So Luc, would you please give us a report on MEP 2040?
Sure, this is Luc. I think you can hear me, and
I'll
keep it short. Yeah, I'll keep it short. So on the data side, we've been collecting data, and what we find out is the recent generation of studies. The MEP, because unlike structure, that once you did the structure, most of the embodied carbon is already there. The replacement of the MEP system and how often you replace them, for example, the importance of filter as an embodied carbon component, all those stuff become important. So we've been collecting those data and trying to understand those replacement cycle better, number one. Number two is we published the refrigerant life cycle calculator that's online. People can start using it. And that's really a low-hanging fruit in MEP and an important one to address embodied carbon. Start with the refrigerant. And now the refrigerant calculator is online. And we are also testing it to see if there are any issues and welcome suggestions. Number three is on the embodied carbon side, getting EPD of MEP equipment has been a lot of discussion about that. We are working closely with ESRE and SIPSI to address the TM65, which is a short version of providing MEP embodied carbon. So we are almost getting an agreement with SIPSI to start the work. So that will be exciting because potentially it's a low cost option to provide embodied carbon on MEP information. More to come about that. Finally, on the outreach, we are working with Building Transparency to add the MEP component to their document. And the upcoming quarterly meeting in MEP 2040 will be engage the client, because oftentimes the discussion is the manufacturer will say, yeah, well, who's interested in in EPDs? So we want the clients to come and tell us. So far we got a bunch of people committed, and at least into the discussion, including commercial people like Heinz, and also like maybe more proactive, more sort of more further down the road sort of organization like Google, Apple. We're discussing with them. So if you want to work together with us on this, or if you have any clients want to bring into this discussion, the quarterly MEP 2040 roundtable is coming up. So it was exciting to hear the voice from the client, from our clients. I think that those are all I have. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks a lot, Luc. Appreciate that update. And now we've got Jamie Ben Borick from the U.S. Department of Energy Building Technologies Office. And Jamie, would you please take it away?
Sure, yes. So this will be a fairly brief update. The Building Technologies Office has been conducting a landscape and gap analysis to better understand the data and the tools available right now. And this is to really inform a building strategy that at a higher level is getting work done across the energy efficiency and renewable energy vertical within the Department of Energy. And so our office, Building Technologies Office, is part of that. And so a few of my colleagues have been a part of that analysis and landscape study work. And should also mention that Argonne National Lab has been doing analysis in the LCA world. And in fact, one area that we have a question about for anyone who is interested is in the area of alternative materials, such as insulation materials that currently don't have EPDs. Argonne has a capability to work with manufacturers to obtain the necessary data that would lead to new EPDs. They wouldn't be creating the EPDs, but they could help with the process of the creation, again, working with manufacturers. So it's unclear at this moment, I think, to the folks that are working on this, whether or not this is a need. I think there's been some questions about whether EC3 or others are already working on this data collection. But if that is something that you're interested in engaging in a conversation, you can reach out to me and I can connect you to the right folks. So again, that's a capability and something that DOE could potentially help with. So that is the update for today. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And I just want to remind everybody, put URLs or links in the chat window for any documents or slides or resources that you've mentioned in your words. Next, we've got Katie Paus from the NRMCA. And Katie, does it stand for Nashville, or what else might it stand for?
National Ready Mix Concrete. I am in Nashville, Tennessee, though. Thank you, Andrew, for the opportunity to share today. Can you guys see my presentation mode? Okay.
You got it.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Paus. I joined the NRMCA in March of this year as their new Director of Sustainability Initiatives. If you're not aware, the NRMCA is the industry-supported trade association for ready-mix concrete. We represent roughly 70% of the concrete volume that is poured in the United States on an annual basis, and we work closely with our members on initiatives such as sustainability, advocacy and policy, quality control, and more. I want to share just a few resources today that we recently published. We have a very popular presentation called The Top 10 Ways to Reduce Embodied Carbon of Concrete that we have turned into a publication that includes several case studies. We also published a condensed version of this content called Climate Action, What You Can Do Right Now, and I'll be sure to drop those links in the chat. We also have our guide to specifications for reducing embodied carbon. And this provides suggested language for Division 3 specs, including establishing a carbon reduction goal, allowing for multiple compliance pathways, including setting a carbon budget for the concrete scope, and language for requiring or requesting product-specific Type 3 EPDs. We are also an EPD program operator, and we work directly with ready-mix suppliers to go through the verification process. And I'll say that we've seen a pretty significant increase in requests for EPD verification, and I anticipate steady growth with the increased demand for EPDs. We also have a P2P, or Prescriptive to Performance initiative, under our Concrete Design Center. And they will review concrete specifications and provide suggestions such as, areas where you might be able to remove unnecessary prescriptive limits that could inhibit the concrete producer's ability to reduce embodied carbon of their mixes. We also have an ongoing monthly webinar series called Concrete Innovations and Learning Center and Award Program. And this is designed to bring practitioners, researchers, and policymakers together to exchange the latest innovations for sustainable concrete. Each session can earn AIA continuing education and professional development hours. And our next webinar is upcoming on August 17th. And then finally, I wanted to share something I'm really excited about. We are in the process of developing a low carbon concrete roundtable event that focuses on specific markets and brings together all project stakeholders, including developers, the AEC community, NGOs and academia, as well as ready-mix producers. And the aim is to identify opportunities and challenges in particular markets, as well as provide a framework for what an embodied carbon charrette could look like, so that the attendees can take what they learn and apply it immediately to projects they are working on. We are looking at piloting this in the Boston market, and we are working with the local CLF hub and SE 2050. And if successful, we hope to expand this to other markets. That's all I have today. If anybody would like to reach out to me directly, I'll drop.
We also are producing a brief on end of life of materials, and that's also about to hit the streets. We just completed this low carbon concrete in the Northeast US guide, which was done in conjunction with New York and Connecticut, I believe. That's available, and we also have been providing some information to Maryland's green purchasing program. And actually, we're talking yesterday with NRMCA and Katie about that. So that's happening. We also completed a series of 4-hour workshops on climate action plans. And actually, a lot of people who are on this call were involved in that as well. It was fairly intensive. We did it weekly in June, so for 4 weeks. And that information went out to about 20 different cities that were involved. And that information is getting kind of consolidated into a kind of a public facing resource, which will be coordinated with the one that CLF has produced as well. On the federal side, we're just completing a roadmap for GSA and other agencies to look at getting to net zero embodied carbon. That has been sort of, we've got a pretty strong draft, which has pretty good data and is interesting, getting some feedback, and would love to get more feedback from other folks. So look forward to kind of talking to many of you about this as we wrap that up in the next month or 6 weeks. Similarly, we're working with DoD on a decarbonization workshop that's coming up next month. And then also working with our industry team on recommendations to EPA on emissions. We also are working private sector quite a bit. ABC is the Advanced Building Construction Collaborative, it's actually ABCC working group, and we have a embodied carbon group there, which has been going on for almost a year now. And we have monthly meetings. That most recent one was basically looking at straw panelized construction and other kinds of really interesting things that Agile Property is doing over in Europe. A lot of this stuff is getting pushed out into communications, of course. We have this end of life document I mentioned, concrete procurement in MA in New York, the federal roadmap, the climate action plan workshops. We're putting out a brief on carbon sequestering buildings, and Chris Magwood is doing a residential embodied carbon research op-ed that should be out shortly. And Chris, I believe, is also speaking at EBA coming up. So thanks, Bruce, for letting us steal him back. We also recently talked with the Australian building simulation folks, Living Futures, the Joint Engineer Training Conference. I did that with Dirk Kussner, Catawba, Association of American Academic Museums, a lot of other things. And then finally, we're also working with Building Transparency and CLF on a impact accounting method for embodied carbon. We've got a first draft, which is now in process of being revised, and that again will be socialized hopefully over this next 3 to 6 months. We are also just have a final draft of a India roadmap looking at both embodied and operational carbon, and that would be for the public sector to adopt. And then on the private sector in India, we just recently completed a workshop looking at embodied carbon as well as operational, and this is being pushed by India's largest real estate developer, Lodha Group. We're currently looking forward to pushing our policy forward, looking at how we change how builders build, and especially looking at sequestration of carbon within that, and also increasing investment and the monetization of embodied carbon. This is, as many of you know, an interest of mine that we continue to try and push forward. So those are what we're doing and where we're headed. And I give the floor back to you, Andrew.
Great. Thank you so much, Victor. And I just want to point out we're at 12 minutes after the hour. We've got another 18 minutes in the meeting. And if everybody who's still on the agenda is able to keep to between 2 and 3 minutes, we will make our 90-minute time target. So next, we'd like to ask Jordan Palmieri from the Oregon Department of Economic or Environmental Quality. Would you go ahead, Jordan?
Yes, hi, can you hear me, Andrew?
Yes, Just fine. We can see your screen.
Excellent. Great. Thanks so much for the invite. I'll go really quick. Sounds like we're short on time. Really wonderful to hear everybody else's updates. I work in the Built Environment program at the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. Here is some work we're doing around embodied carbon. We spend a lot of time on concrete. Helped the city of Portland produce and publish the first city procurement carbon limits in the country. And as expected, and good news is that we have many other cities in Oregon now hoping to follow suit. And so a lot of people are starting to look at their concrete purchases at a public procurement level and think about policies that follow in Portland's footsteps. We're also do a lot of proof of concept pilot projects. The picture on the right is from a residential, single family residential home that we're working on, because despite concrete being low hanging fruit, we still need to always show that this is possible. So there's that. We also work a lot with EPDs for public purchasing at the state level. We're one of the Western states that now has passed a Buy Clean Oregon bill. It exclusively focuses on Oregon Department of Transportation purchases of concrete, steel, and asphalt. It's a kind of a slow rollout, doesn't actually start till 2025. The program isn't required to start. The good news, though, is that it also includes small business grants for EPD development for Oregon businesses in those three industries, and also requires ODOT to do a full life cycle assessment of different pavement designs. So those are a few upsides of the bill. We at Oregon DEQ recently released a Sustainable Buildings for All framework. This is an incentive framework intended to be picked up by cities looking to incentivize more sustainable building development in their jurisdictions. This focuses on climate, equity and racial justice, and human health outcomes. Basically, it's loosely modeled off of the Living Building Challenge pilot program out of Seattle, and a lot of lessons learned out of that program. And it's essentially giving FAR bonuses to programs that follow to projects that follow certain pathways, right? So we kind of pick and choose from different different point structures and different rating systems, and give a pathway for different projects to qualify for these FAR bonuses. And embodied carbon is included in this framework. We do some work basically directly consulting on state buildings, because we lack policy that requires state buildings to do this, but we do have an executive order, and executive orders kind of come and go depending on who your executive is. And we do have a governor's election coming in November, so we'll see how this goes. But nevertheless, we do have some active projects working with state buildings to reduce embodied carbon, and I will work to send links out to all of this stuff afterwards. The last thing I want to highlight is just some of the capacity building we're doing. We provided a grant to AIA Oregon and Building Transparency to hold tally workshops. We're giving away 50 free tally licenses to local architecture and engineering firms here in Oregon who want to take the training. And that's been great. We had our first workshop a few weeks ago. It's great to see new people in the mix. And then finally, we also play a co-leadership role in the local CLF hub here in Portland. So thank you so much. And I'll drop some links in the chat.
Great, thank you so much, Jordan. And unfortunately, Gitika Moda is going to have to leave the meeting, so she won't be able to give us a report on a brand new member of the Roundtable, the We Mean Business Coalition, but we'll give her a couple extra minutes at the next Roundtable meeting. So thank you for joining us today, Gitika. And then Patrick Langevin from National Resources Canada, please go right ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So thanks, Andrew, for having me. Great to hear all of the work that everybody's doing. I didn't prepare a presentation, but I will share my screen. Oops, if you can let me do that, Andrew, that would be great. Just the update that I wanted to provide was with regards to the release of our material carbon emissions estimator. So before I get into that, I work for the federal government here in Canada. So in a group called the Local Energy Efficiency Partnerships. I think we're going to have to change our name, just given the focus is shifting from energy to carbon. We're a small group. We work closely with the home building industry to provide them with information and knowledge to support better decisions. That's it in a nutshell. We are market responsive. So when we find a gap or a barrier in the market, we have our mandate is broad enough that we're able to adapt and provide some support. So all I wanted to show you today was some of the work that we've been doing with regards to a tool. Bruce mentioned Chris Magwood, as well as some folks from RMI. We've been working with Chris to put together a material carbon emissions estimator for the Canadian home building market, which is connected to our national energy evaluation infrastructure. So NRCan, or Natural Resources Canada, has a tool called HOT 2000, which is essentially the marking tool for all of the energy performance programs in Canada. And so this material carbon emissions estimator is a little bit of an extension. It's a fairly simple tool. It leverages some data that Chris has put together for us and allows you to walk through the construction of a home and really deal with the material components. So we're not dealing with the life cycle components. Those are things that we'll be looking at going forward. It's available now for download. So there's two links. We've got the tool and we've got a user guide. And so I will share the link in the chat. The other thing I should just mention is that we are looking to create some training that we will be delivering with the Canadian Home Builders Association here. So they're the equivalent to what you would have down there, the National Association of Home Builders. And that training will be a fairly simple training, a couple hours, and we're going to be delivering that in regions all across the country to get this conversation going up here in Canada, particularly on the low-rise housing side of things. So that's it for me. I will drop that in the chat, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to follow up post this call.
Great, thank you so much, Patrick. And we have 4 final presenters in the last 12 minutes of the meeting. So Ken Levinson from Passive House Network, would you please go next?
Yes, hi. I'm Ken Levinson. I'm the executive director of the Passive House Network. I don't have any slides, so I'm just going to make a few quick points. We're really excited. The Passive House Network is a national nonprofit. If you're not familiar, we are affiliated with the Passive House Institute in Darmstadt, Germany, and part of the global Passive House community, working closely with partners around the world in Passive House. And as such, we're very focused on operational energy, and it's been a growing concern of tackling embodied carbon. And we have included it in various ways in our activities in the past, but this year in particular, we really stepped up and at the beginning of the year, released a new tool called the pH Ribbon, which we've mentioned before. It's a plugin to the Passive House energy model, the PHPP. So you're calculating your operational energy usage with the PHPP, and with the pH Ribbon, which utilizes the EC3 database and other inputs, you're able to calculate the total projected carbon emissions, both from the embodied and the operational in a single platform. It's important to note, so we've just launched that, and we're looking to provide case studies in the coming weeks and months on single family, multifamily, institutional, commercial buildings. One of the things that we've done this year, we just completed our national conference for 2022 in Boston in June, and we were really excited to put embodied carbon on a major footing within the conference. So we broke it into 4 themes of energy efficiency, electrification, embodied carbon, and social equity, and really finding those intersections and leverage points across to really fully optimize our building efforts. And in that, we really elevated embodied carbon as an issue, and we're thrilled to have a panel discussion in particular that was moderated by Julie Janiski of Borough-Happold, and we had a really great array of panelists as well as specific sessions. We look to build on that going into next year. Our conference will be in Denver in 2023. Two other quick comments on Boston. One, we were very happy, it's not directly related to embodied carbon, but we were happy to feature the Winthrop Center building. It's a mixed-use building. It's a 56-story tower that will have over 800,000 square feet of certified Passive House office space. So one of the things that we're constantly pushing on is that Passive House is not just about houses, and not just multifamily either, institutional office buildings and the like. And in that expanding message, we're also excited to work, my last note here, with the Facade Tectonics Institute. I saw Mick Peterson dropped a note into the chat. We will be working in partnership with them at their World Congress in October in Los Angeles with some specific sessions on Passive House, and really excited to build on those relationships. That's it.
Great, thank you so much, Ken. And we've just got a few minutes and three final presenters. Thanks everybody for being patient with the meeting. Daniel Meckery from the EPA, please go right ahead. Your voice is very, very soft, Daniel.
Okay, is this better?
Slightly better.
Okay, you know what? I'm gonna hold off for now,
that's
go
great.
to someone else and I'll call by phone.
That's good. No, it's good right now. We can hear you well.
Perfect. All right, everyone. Hi, I'm Danny. I'm with the EPA and I work in the Climate Protection Partnerships Division. Really exciting to see all these updates. Very quickly, I'm going to share two resources that EPA has developed and that I think would be very useful for this group. Let's go to my web browser. So the first resource is called an energy performance indicator. And this lets you know how energy efficient a manufacturing plant is. And this is important because we can't expect economy-wide greenhouse gas reductions without energy efficiency in the manufacturing sector. There's not enough renewable energy to go around, so every precious drop of renewables that comes on needs to be used efficiently. So a construction product may have a low GWP because it's manufactured in a grid that's clean or is using less carbon intensive fuels, but it doesn't mean the plant where it's being manufactured was using that energy efficiently. So we have indicators for this. We don't need to create these from scratch. EPA, through the Energy Star program, has developed and maintained these tools that are free and download to use. We have them for nearly 20 different kinds of plants, including cement plants, integrated steel plants, and glass plants. And industry has been using these for the past 10 years to benchmark their performance. So all that you need to do is ask your suppliers what the score of the cement plant or the glass plant is. We also have a tool that shows Energy Star certified plants. These are plants that apply for certification and are in the top 25% of efficiency. So you can get an idea of where those plants are. The second resource I'm going to tell you about is carbon intensity benchmarks for US cement and glass plants. In the US, entities that emit over 25,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas need to report them to EPA. We don't publish the intensity per plant, but we recently developed benchmarks that show the distribution of intensity for those plants. So this one is developed for the cement sector. It's going to show you what the median distribution of performance is for cement. So it's showing that the average median cement plant is going to emit 0.83 metric tons of CO2 emissions per ton of clinker produced. And this can be important for this group because we know that you all are involved in analyzing performance and setting benchmarks. So this could give you an idea of whether the cradle to gate benchmarks that you submit are kind of in the ballpark. And also these data are based on data that is required to report to the government. So as such, it's fairly representative and authoritative. There are some more nuances about that, but you could read that in the fact sheet. So my email is in the chat and would be glad to talk to anyone more about these two tools. Thanks, Andrew.
Great, thank you, Daniel. And Pamela Conrad from Climate Positive Design.
All right. Hey, everyone. Happy Friday. Good to see you. Just a couple quick updates on my end. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm a landscape architect helping other landscape architects take climate action through climate positive design, and including the Pathfinder tool. And I've been helping the American Society of Landscape Architects develop a climate action plan. So that is wrapping up soon, and we'll be publishing that at the conference this November. And then my second update was more of a personal update that I have been selected to be a Loeb Fellow. So I am going to be actually stepping away from significant professional obligations for the coming year. Any of you that are familiar with the program, it is developed to support mid-career professionals that seem to be on to something and to helping out the world, but need some time and space to figure it out. So I get to spend the next year in Cambridge, taking all the classes that I want from Harvard or MIT, and I think, you know, for many of us who have found ourselves on this path in a way that we never really, you know, expected, or we've been kind of going at this with, you know, the papers on the side of our desk while we're doing full-time jobs. So I think for me, it's just a really great personal opportunity. So I'll still probably be participating in these monthly and keeping up with you all. But I just wanted to share that news. So that's it. Thanks.
Wow, congratulations. That sounds like a fabulous opportunity for the next year, Pamela.
Thank you.
And then finally, Webley Bowles from the New Buildings Institute. Webley, I want to thank you for being so patient and for being so gracious as to go last on our agenda. But please take it over. Webley, are you there? Looks like she may have had to check out a little bit early. So I'm sorry that we won't be able to get her report this month. Next month or the next roundtable that we have, I'll put her right at the top of the agenda to make amends for leaving her till the end this time. So thanks everybody for being here today. And I will be posting the video recording as well as notes and links from this conversation online, and you'll all get an email notification about it. So thank you very much for coming today, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.